Hi, it's Erin. I'm your regular co-host of First Bite. First of all, I want to thank y'all so much for tuning and listening to First Bite. We've been incredibly encouraged and excited by the feedback we've received and are looking forward to the future. In the meantime, if you've been enjoying First Bite, please take a moment, maybe pause your device to subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you're listening. This podcast started out as a small idea to bring convenient, tangible resources to SLPs and other professionals, and we value your feedback more than anything. Leaving those reviews truly helps us out. Enjoy the episode, and thanks for listening.
Hey, Erin, have you heard that we have a promotional code for speechtherapypd.com?
I think I heard the same thing.
Yes. So, as if we both hadn't heard that. But it's First Bite. So if you log on to speechtherapypd.com and enter the promotional code First Bite, it takes $10 off an annual subscription. And Erin, do you want to?
That includes all the pod courses.
Yes. And we have 4 now. I'm not sure if y'all knew that. We have 4. We have First Bite. Yeah, we do. It's Speech Uncensored. And in case y'all haven't heard of this lovely lady, she focuses on adults. And I know that there's a fair few of you out there that PRN in peds and or PRN in adults. So be sure to check out Speech Uncensored. And it also includes the Speech Link and the SLP Now podcast with Miss Marisha, who I like fangirl crush. She's awesome. Okay. All right. So promo code is
First Bite.
Whoop, whoop. And don't let it autocorrect you to BYTE because it did that to me a couple times. So there it is. Woohoo! Hi, folks, and welcome to First Bite. Fed, fun, functional resources for the pediatric clinician. I am your host on this nerd venture, Michelle Dawson, MS CCC-SLP, the All Things Peds SLP. I am a colleague in the trenches of home health early intervention, right there with you. I run my own private practice, Heartwood Speech Therapy, in Coletown, South Carolina, and guest lecture nationwide on best practices for early intervention for the medically fragile child. First Bite's mission is short and sweet, to bring light and hope to the world for the pediatric clinician, parent, or advocate. In this podcast, we cover everything from AAC to breastfeeding, best practice for running a private practice, and all the nitty-gritty details involving feeding and swallowing by interviewing the subject matter experts themselves. We bring the data to you. Every 4th episode, I am joined by the lovely Erin Forward, MSP, CF, SLP, a Yankee transplant who actually inspired this journey and who also walks the wild, woolly, and sometimes sticky walk of early intervention with us. Sit back, relax, and watch out for all the squirrels and enjoy this geeky gig brought to you by SpeechTherapyPD.com. I'm humbled to call today's guest a dear friend, and I am always in awe of her grace, strength, and the gentleness of her presence. Dr. Faye Murray is one of those rare gems of a soul that by showing up, it makes a room just glow. She is also the reason that tonight's episode will be fun and functional and fabulous, but just saying. So the backstory, because if you know me, there's always a backstory. I first met Faye a few years ago at a CSEP conference. And for those of you that don't know, CSEP stands for Council of State Association Presidents. Faye was serving as the president of Arizona, and I was serving as the president-elect of South Carolina when we first landed at the same breakout round tables. And it truly was nerdy gal love at first sight. And the best part is that I get to call her friend. So when I was out visiting their amazing Arizona State Hearing Association convention, P.S. Mark your calendars for April 3rd through 4th, 2020 in Phoenix, Arizona for next year's convention. Y'all, they put on an amazing show, and it's like the craziest reds you've ever seen because Phoenix is not green, it's red. So just saying. But back to the story at hand. So this past April, I was out there and I managed to sweet talk her into doing on a pod course on a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts. And that's the ethics behind evaluating and treating patients who speak a different language. So for me, this is important because, as I have said in the past, I speak English and bad English. And I mean, it's pretty clear. The hills are in my bones. And God help me, because sometimes they fall out my mouth when I forget that, like, proper grammar is a thing. Or if I go to someone and I'm around someone who also speaks like they stepped out of the Appalachia, it just happens, y'all. So for me, this is a really deep professional concern, as I am clearly not equipped, nor do I feel that it's appropriate for me to eval or treat a patient that speaks any other language other than my own, as I don't have that knowledge base. It is simply not in my wheelhouse. Now, for Faye, not only is it professional, but it's also deeply personal, as she herself is a bilingual clinician. So, Faye, lay it on us. Where are you from? How did you become this amazing SLP? And how did you learn to speak 2 languages? Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Well, hello. I am absolutely speechless by this amazing introduction. I'm very humbled, and yes, all of it is true.
Of course it is. I love you.
So I'm a big fan of Michelle. So I was born and raised in Cuba, and I came to the United States when I was 10 years old, and I was a monolingual English speaker at the time. But
what does that mean?
I was monolingual Spanish speaker. I didn't speak any English, and which is really interesting because they say that it takes, so many years to learn a second language, but a lot of it has to do with your personality and your, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. I'm an extrovert, so I think I was probably monolingual for maybe 10 minutes. I dove right in, and most SLPs like to talk, and I think a lot of us are born talkers. There are some that are extroverts and introverts, but for me, I learned to speak English. It took me maybe 6 months to have to be able to speak to friends and get around. And then it was a process of learning more of the academic English. So going into middle school and high school, I was still doing a lot of interpreting. But I went to college without really knowing what field I was going to go into, and found speech pathology my sophomore year and never looked back. And so I went to graduate school like all of your listeners did. And at that time, I'm a little older than you, an older generation by a lot. But at that time, we really didn't have any coursework on bilingual issues or multicultural issues. It just wasn't it, So I became a speech pathologist. I ended up working with children who were migrant workers, and also in California and in Arizona. And then I met my current husband, and he was working in the Navajo reservation. And so here I was, a bilingual Spanish-English speech pathologist without really a lot of background on what that meant. And I ended up working in the Navajo Nation, where no one spoke Spanish. It was Navajo and Navajo-influenced English. It was a dialect of English. And now I became, like everyone else, a monolingual speech pathologist because my Spanish didn't really serve me there. And so that's what started my quest into figuring out how do I do this ethically? How do I do the right thing for the children that I work with? How do I find out if this is a disorder or not? A lot of things didn't make sense. I was given standardized tests and such. And so that led on a quest to find out how to do this appropriately, and it led into a doctoral program so that I could get more education. So it's kind of a long journey, and I'm still learning. And I did a lot of things wrong along the way, and now I'm trying to rectify that and to spread the joy.
I love that. Yes, because it's always interesting to me when I have a student and they assume that I know all the things. And I'm like, I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface and I'm still learning. But I feel like if you're able to admit that, like, dude, I totally did that wrong back in the day, but I'm better than I was, I feel like that means you have a soul for growth and you
That's
will
right.
continue. Okay. Now I'm just curious. Do you speak any Navajo?
um, when I try to speak Navajo, it comes out as profanities. So it's not, Navajo is a tonal language, and sometimes I mean to say puppy, and I come out saying what comes out of the puppy's rear instead. They're very close. So I understand a little tiny bit, and the pronunciation is very difficult. And so no, I never picked up Navajo to a fluency stage. So I speak Spanish and I speak English. And now I work now in my current job. I do work with children and adults who speak a variety of languages. I have a Mandarin person that I work with. Someone who speaks Mandarin. I have French. I have German. I have, of course, Navajo, Spanish, and Korean, and other languages. Just like many of the SLPs that are out there, we are exposed to so many different cultures in the schools and in clinical settings that we're at. So, and I don't speak any of those languages. I speak Spanish and English.
That's awesome. Okay. I would just want to take a second. Everybody that is out there, if you are listening, I'm not sure if you caught it, but the tail end of July, ASHA put out an ASHA Take Action, and it was on their advocacy page. And this perfectly ties into our topic of the day. And it was all about asking our individual state representatives to take action on the promote workforce diversity and allied health professionals.
Yes.
And that, if you didn't catch it, you can go to the ASHA Advocacy Facebook page and they have it posted there. And if you've never done one of their advocacy actions, it's super easy. You click on it, you put your name and your address in, it automatically populates your local representative, and then it will send them an email. But the goal of that legislation is to help offset the graduate school tuition for our colleagues or our future colleagues that will bring variety in backgrounds and ethnicities and languages to our field. Because what was the statistic, Faye? Something like over 90% or 80% of clinicians are
it's above 95%. I would say, it's like something like 5% of the workforce right now are culturally diverse. And in some of those aren't even bilingual. So,
yes. And if you look at the children and the adults that we work with, that is not reflective of our nation and those that are in need. So please, I am asking, put your big girl britches on. If you're a gent, I don't know what you call the underoos, but take action, do the thing.
It's very easy. You are right. It's very easy to do.
Yes. Okay. All right. So we opened the gate and diverted. So let's get back on track. All right. So what are some of the most common myths that people have about bilingualism? Because I know one right out the gate, and that's, if my kid learns a second language, then they won't learn the first language. Because I battle that with ASL when I'm trying to teach ASL. Well, if they learned how to talk with their hands, they're not going to talk with their mouth. So that's like, I carry that over to
and with AAC, you've heard of that with AAC as well.
Yes.
Have a device, they're not going to then speak.
Yes, which is wrong, inaccurate.
Which is wrong and inaccurate. And another myth that I hear all the time is that if they're learning 2 or more languages at the same time, that it causes confusion, that it causes a language delay. And so many professionals out there, pediatricians, whoever, teachers, and even many SLPs will tell the parents, unfortunately, erroneously, that they should just pick one language and stick to that because it will cause confusion if they if they expose the child to two languages.
And that's
That is
wrong.
not true. That is not true. None of the research backs that. We think that it makes sense. In our mind, we're thinking, well, that makes sense that a child, especially someone with delayed cognitive skills or delayed language, but the research just does not. They've done research on children with on the spectrum with autism, and children with Down syndrome, children of all different backgrounds, and they have not found that to be true. What is true is that children should be able to communicate in whatever language the family uses. So whatever dynamic of the family, whether that's a code switching where they're going back and forth and saying words in Spanish and words in English, or maybe they speak with grandma in one language and with another family member in another. That is how the household works. That's how the dynamics of the household. So when we tell a family, don't speak this language at home, only speak English or whatever language we advise, then what we're telling them essentially is ignore that part of your family, ignore that dynamic. The child cannot be part of that. And so when you think about it that way, we are actually separating the child from what the other family is exposed to. And we're asking sometimes the parents to do something that's unnatural. And many times they just can't comply anyway. So we have a bilingual parent who speaks both, and I'm going to use Spanish just for the sake of it, but who uses both Spanish and English in the home. And maybe they're stronger in their Spanish than their English. And we tell the parent something like, you should be talking to them in English so that they're ready for preschool, kindergarten, or for life. Then we're forcing that parent to speak. Maybe they're not fluent in English. So then they're modeling a language that's not natural for them, and maybe they're not proficient in it. The rest of the time, that parent's not going to stop speaking Spanish. They will turn around to their spouse or to their other children or to their friends, and they'll be speaking the native language, but then they're not encouraging their child to learn that. They're teaching them English. So now the child becomes separated from maybe grandma or maybe other functions that happen in the household. They're ostracized because they're not learning the language or the dialect of the home.
Okay, so when I was in Arizona, there was sweet friend Jackie came over from New Mexico, and she was telling me, and Jackie, I'm going to share this and ask forgiveness later. How about that? She said that when she was growing up, her family, they were native Spanish speakers, and they were encouraged not to speak Spanish, but to speak English, because they were afraid that they wouldn't be prepared for school. So their families would not allow them to speak Spanish in the home. And they were, she's a speech pathologist, totally typically developing. Oh my God, she's brilliant and kind and warm and fuzzy, and you would love her. But also, Jackie, join the New Mexico board. They will love you. And that blew my mind. But she said that it was frowned upon to speak her native language. And now she was like, I look like I should speak Spanish, but I only speak English. And, that they're losing that part of their culture and their identity. And that thought had never crossed my mind, that a family would do that under the misinformation that would help them succeed in life.
Yes, that actually, we did that. The schools did that. They encouraged the parents, and in fact, in many places, children were punished for speaking their native language. Many of my Navajo friends will tell you, I know people who were sent to boarding schools, and they were physically punished. They were trying to get them to assimilate, make them American, and that American at that time meant English speaker. You dress a certain way, you speak a certain way, anything that looks foreign, we need to strip that away. That was the thought at that time. And so I have personal friends who have told me stories of being physically having corporal punishment because they were speaking their native tongue. So these children, for example, in the Navajo culture, who were taken to these boarding schools, taken away from their families during the school year, whether it be in a home or an actual dormitory at a very young age, they were stripped of their culture, and language is a huge part of culture. So then the children would go home in the summers back to their families, and they couldn't communicate with them. They had to, relearn their Navajo, or they had to relearn their culture. And that was very difficult. Right now, what I see happening with some of these families that are choosing to, because you can choose, families can choose, I'm only going to speak English. It should always be family choice. We should always say, what would you like for him to be able to speak as he grows older? What do you foresee him, how interacting, who do you foresee him interacting with? But I have some families that I've worked with that have chosen to just speak English to their children. And maybe one spouse will speak English and the other spouse speaks Spanish. And what happens is now that child can't communicate with his dad, or that child maybe can't communicate with his mom. So then they use the older siblings as an interpreter for their own child. I've seen this. And you can—
For their own kid, to
Yes.
interpret their own little one.
Exactly. So you can see how that kind of changes the whole power dynamics in the home when you have given power to an older sibling to actually do maybe the disciplining or the counseling, as these children who cannot communicate with their parents, grow older and they become teenagers and they can't communicate with their parents in their parents' tongue. Even less, yeah, it's crazy. And even, less crazy than that, but just as sad is children who cannot speak to their grandparents. So they lose that generational, that wisdom, that nurturing that you get from extended families. They might go to a family event and there's grandma in a corner talking to older family members, and all the grandchildren just look at her and aren't able to dialogue with her and to get the knowledge and the experience and the love that is passed down through a heritage language. So it's all very, very sad. There's a lot of language loss that happens throughout the languages. Usually by the second generation, it's gone. So you get the first person like me that comes in, and maybe my children might speak some of that language. By the next generation, it's gone. There is this idea that, if we have so many languages, then we're going to lose English. English is never going to be lost. It's a dominant language all over the world. It's the language of money. It's the language of power. So that's never going to be lost. It's these other languages that are secondary that carry so much culture and identity. Plus, a lot of the research shows that bilingualism is actually a very positive thing, that we are able, when you're able to express in multiple languages, that you cognitively you're able to understand concepts and communicate concepts that might not be something that is easily communicated in one language, but you can do so in others. When my sisters and I are talking to each other, we code switch all the time. We're all fluent in Spanish and in English, and we talk at the same time. Of course, all of us. There are four of us, and so it's crazy loud and just whole wonderful Cuban thing. And sometimes we say things in the language where it communicates at best. There are times when we're speaking in English because that communicates at best. My academic language in English is much stronger. My love language is much stronger in Spanish. Also, there's some feelings or things that it's better communicated in shorter and even more specific in that other language. So bilingualism is definitely is a plus. And other parts of the world do it all the time. Children are raised learning 2 or 3 languages. It's only weird here in this country, but in other countries you would never hear, oh, don't mix languages, don't teach them too many languages. It might confuse them. That's an American thing. That's not what the rest of the world believes or practices.
Well, we actually just enrolled both of our children in a Mandarin immersion school.
So cool.
Oh my gosh, it's so cool. They totally think that they have gone to ninja school because they're boys and they're in karate, and we are really into Kung Fu Panda. And I haven't yet had the heart to tell them that they're not actually going to grow up and be ninjas. I'm kind of assuming that they're going to figure that out along the way.
Can I tell you how much I love this?
Oh my God, this is great. They're like, so what'd you do today? They're like, we did not learn karate moves. I'm like, that's okay. We're going to go right down the street to karate class, and they'll follow it through, right? Don't worry about this. Oh my God, I'm lying to my children by omission, but it's fine. It's cool.
I remember my son coming home from kindergarten, his second day, and he says, I haven't learned how to read yet.
Oh my God, that's great.
I don't know what, this is false advertising. What's the deal? Anyway.
Well, oh, boy moms, y'all! I won't even tell you how many super amazing gross boy mom conversations that the lovely Faye and I have had. I will spare you the details, but if you're a boy mom out there listening, or if you're pregnant with a boy, imagine something gross, and it will get 40 times grosser. But then they'll turn around and say, "I love you, and you're beautiful, and you're the princess," and
That's right, and everything's better. Yes.
And everything's better. So while everything has a mysterious smell of poo somewhere, but like it will be better. Okay.
Don't stick your hands in your boys' pockets.
Yeah, ever. Or let them say, "Here, hold this," without first inspecting what they're handing to you.
Absolutely. Truth.
Yeah, truth. Okay. So what other common myths are there out there?
There are myths regarding the therapy that, for example, that idea law does not, because we're supposedly an English only country or whatever, that we are unable to do therapy in any other language but English because it is against some law. And some states do have an English only law, etc. But none of that is true. We can provide therapy in any language that the child speaks. And so we're dealing with the disability. We're not dealing with language competency. And so many times we think, that when we're testing or when we're assessing, we want to see how much English they know versus how much the other language they know. And that's true. But what we're looking at is how do they communicate? We're looking for language disorders and disabilities. So when a child is speaking another language, we have to find out if they have that disability in that language. And so we need to assess, and sometimes we need to do treatment in that language when possible. And that's not against any law, and it's not un-American. So that's also tends to be a myth. There's also this other myth that somehow there's a language delay when children are learning two languages. That we're just going to wait and see because they'll outgrow it. This is part of their second language, and not really. That's not true. There's not a delay that happens when children are learning two languages. So that's a huge myth. It's not illegal to work with children with two languages. There's no delay and there's no confusion. So if we can get all those things cleared out, then we can talk about what really difficult is. How do I do this? How do I? Yeah. What? How, I don't even know.
That's what I want to know, because I one time got called in to do an eval on a man that only spoke Guinea, which is like a regional. And if anybody out there has heard the term Guinea, then you too are from the waters on the northern peninsula in Virginia, which ain't that big. And I spoke English and bad English, and the janitor and the wife had to act as our translators because they were the only people that understood Guinea. And he had absolutely no deficits anywheres. And there was definitely some 4-letter words that I perfectly understood. But okay, all right. So next question. In what ways can a monolingual SLP, such as myself, I only speak English, conduct an eval and deliver meaningful services and intervention when a child is a dual language learner?
So, very good question and very difficult to answer. But the crux of it is that we have to understand that there aren't a lot of bilingual SLPs out there. So, there just aren't. And so we can't just all the time say, well, they've got to be tested by a bilingual SLP. They need to be provided services by a bilingual SLP. There just aren't out there. We're trying, and I think that the roles are increasing. But even so, I'm a bilingual SLP, and that took a lot of learning and having to go back to school and finding out how to talk about Spanish the same way that I talk about English development. So it's not a given that when somebody is bilingual that you are a bilingual SLP. That's not a given, first of all. So we have a lot of SLPs out there that speak two languages but haven't been trained in that first language, that other language that they speak. So that even lowers the numbers even more so, right? And so what do we do? Realistically, what do we do? Well, we are going to have to start learning to use interpreters, and we're going to have to start to look at the things that we can do. Many times I start out in the schools, and I can talk about, EI a little bit as well, but in the schools, I have the team do all the work for me to find out how the child is assimilated. So, how long they've been in this country, what kind of services that they've had, what are the concerns, and so get all that background information. I also like to find out in what context does a child speak the other languages and to what percentage? And so there are several surveys that are done that are like input-output surveys to find out how much of that language the child understands of each language and how much of that does he speak. If a child, for example, is listening to more than 80% of one particular language, and he also, expresses himself in more than 80% of that particular language, then the eval should be done in that language. So the eval
is 80% the
so let's say
that we should be looking for?
It's like above 80%, but I'm going to say that I'm not talking about standardized tests. I'm talking about just doing the evaluation in that primary language. You're not going to turn away, but you could say that he's primary 80% and above, that he's more of a speaker of, let's say, Spanish. Okay, so you have a child that's speaking mostly 80% Spanish, understanding and expressing himself in that language. Then that evaluation needs to be done in Spanish, and that could be done with an interpreter. And we'll have to, or, obviously the best would be a bilingual, a certified qualified bilingual SLP. If that same child who's growing up as a dual language learner is listening, speaking more English, then the evaluation can be done in English. However, you do not dismiss the fact that he's a dual language learner. We have no standardized we have maybe one, but we really don't have a lot of standardized tests out there that are normed on dual language learners. They just don't exist. We have the BESA, which is a Spanish English, and it's only for ages 4 to 6. And I know Dr. Peña is working on an extension, but we really don't. We have like even the PLS. I mean, if you look at the norm group, a lot of it is
well, the PLS in general.
Yeah, the PLS in general. Exactly. Let's put it out there. But it's Puerto Rican children from New York. I mean, and so you look at the SELF, for example, and it's monolingual children who are not dual language learners. That's the norm group. So you really can't compare these children that are being raised as dual language learners to the norm groups of these tests that do not have a significant representation of dual language learners in their norms. So there's nothing out there. So you have to look and see what is it that I'm looking for? We do a comprehensive evaluation. We're looking at articulation. We're looking at language. We're looking at voice and fluency. We do oral MEC exams. It's the same, right? As you would, but now you don't have standardized tests. You can use some of the subtests and just not score them. There you can do narrative analysis. There are lots of free resources out there. So the actual, what you would test is the same as you would do with other children. You just can't use norms because there are none. And that's what makes it very difficult. And so we go back to our training and we do our very best. And if a child, for example, has maybe 40%, he's expressing himself in one language 40%, and he's maybe listening 60% at home, he hears it. And then maybe at school, he's actually hearing more like, over 90% at school in English, and he's maybe expressing maybe 80%. Then that child is a dual language learner. He's being exposed to two languages. And so you must assess in both languages. You want to find out if he has a language difference or a disorder. A difference is when his language is actually what he's saying, what he's understanding. That is, it's due to the fact that he has two languages. So there's some mixture, maybe there's some influence of the other language, and not really due to a disability. We have to make that distinction. So, for example, if a child can't say the SH sound in English, shh, and he's been referred to you for that, it could be that he has an accent, that he doesn't have that SH. Actually, TH is a biggie. I mean, there are very few languages that use TH, and so a lot of people from different countries come in and they have to learn the TH sound. So if he's being
no idea.
Yeah, TH is hard for just about everybody around the world. So if your child's refer to you because he's not using the TH sound, then you have to look and do consonant inventories of his original language, of his heritage language. And those are found on the ASHA website. It's pretty cool. And other places such as, I think, Portland State University. And there's just many different resources that I can give you. You can put up on your website if you like. But
yes.
Yeah, so you can look at you can do consonant inventories. What sounds are found in his language? What sounds are found in English? And then you look at those that are common, and then you look at those that are not found in either one, and you can determine, oh, you know what, he doesn't have the SH in his language, so he's kind of not producing it, or maybe using a substitution because of this language difference, because he doesn't have it, and so he's using an approximation because he has an accent. Okay, so that's not a disability. There are people in our field that work on accent reduction. That's perfectly okay, but that's not billable. It's not a disability. Okay, that's a difference. And so the same thing could be said for, language, like structure, like syntax. If a child is maybe putting the adjective in, after the noun, or maybe they're not using, the plural forms, or just a different sentence structure. You have to look at what those structures are in his original language and see if that's the reason why. Because most of the time, there's that influence from the other language that sometimes is a temporary thing, especially if they're just learning the language. Sometimes it's something that persists, and then we can address that at a different point.
Hey, I'm not sure if you've caught the updates yet, but I have the pleasure, if you haven't seen it already, of announcing the 2020 SpeechTherapyPD.com Conference at Sea. We are going aboard a Royal Caribbean Alaskan cruise departing Vancouver, British Columbia, July 10th through 17th of 2020. And I am thrilled and humbled to be announcing that I will be presenting. I have a 3-hour course, a 2-hour course, a 1-hour course, and I'm co-presenting another 3-hour course. And my co-presentation will be with the one and only Lee Ann Porter of Speech Uncensored, which is Speech Therapy PD's newest adult course podcast that just added to our lineup. And Marisha McGordy, the guru behind SLP Now, will also be there. And if you register before September 30th, then you get a free 6-month subscription to SLP Now. So again, make sure that you register before September 30th of 2019 for the Speech Therapy PD Conference at Sea, which is July 10th through 17th of 2020. And I cannot wait to see y'all aboard a ship where we're going to see real life bears, and hopefully we'll get to see Northern Lights. So whoop, whoop, see you at sea. Bye. I have 400 questions.
Oh, wow. Only.
Okay. No, my brain's on fire and I'm dying. Okay. So one, you said something in passing. Just to clarify, you said ASHA has a consonant or phonemic inventory of different languages on their website.
Absolutely. Yes, they do.
Is it under the practice portal? I'm assuming
it's under the practice portal. I believe it's the multicultural section, but you can actually just go in there and look. And not only consonant inventories, but they also have sections where they talk about just the structure of the language, the syntax and pragmatics. And they even have links to articles and links to other places where these things are discussed. It's a wonderful resource, and people don't even know that we have it. So the first thing I do when I have somebody on my caseload, I look up as much as I can about that culture and that language. I try to find out about it, whether I'm going to use an interpreter or not. Sometimes my interpreters are my cultural brokers. So they kind of help me to figure out, okay, because for example, in Navajo land, if you're a traditional Navajo person and you live in a hogan, which is a round home, you come in through the left and around. You don't come into the right through the front door. You don't really knock at the door. There's all of these pragmatic, these cultural norms that you need to just be aware of. So you're just aware that it's a difference. Maybe the child won't look you in the eye, and that's not a sign of autism. That's a cultural thing. Children in certain cultures are not encouraged to look at an adult directly in the face. That's considered disrespectful, or they're not supposed to walk next to you. They're supposed to walk so many, feet behind you. So a lot of times we have to be careful that we don't label those as okay, he's pragmatically inappropriate, he's on the spectrum, when it's really cultural. So it's good to go to these resources and kind of familiarize yourself. You're not going to be an expert, but you need to go in armed. So wherever you land.
Hold that thought. One thought. Also, people, when you're going into their homes, this is so much more because you're going there instead of them coming to you at the clinic. So always make sure that you have a pair of clean socks in your bags. Because I've worked with EIs and SLPs in the past and students that were like slip-on shoes or didn't have socks. And then the families asked them to take their shoes off before they enter the door or as soon as they enter the door. Or you have to wash in, like the bathroom or the kitchen sink and, those factors. So make sure that you, like she said, research it before you go in. That way, when you go to their homes to do the eval, you don't cause offense on accident. Okay, sorry, continue. Go.
No, this is great. People are very forgiving because they don't expect you to know everything. But I think part of our professional practice is that we try to arm ourselves with as much information as we can. So wherever you land, wherever you're at, whatever region of the country you're in, you should learn about the cultures that are around you. You're going to become sort of like a mini expert. Some places they have so many cultures but you tend to start familiarizing yourself is what you should do with the dialects and the languages and the cultural norms of those groups. And I'm saying dialects, this is really important. There are people who say they speak English and they're monolingual English speakers. They'll tell you that. But many people are speaking a dialect or a form of English that is it's just what it is. It's part of their culture. And so they'll say, oh yeah, we speak only English, but they're speaking a dialect of English and not a standard form. And so we have to be aware of what that sounds like and what is appropriate in that language. What maybe it could be phonology, it could be syntax, it could be semantics. And make sure that you know that so that you are able to tell, is this child this is a difference or a disorder, even in the dialect. So it's not just about a second language. It could be a dialectal difference.
And also voice.
Yes.
Y'all, the voice. One of my former students was from Wisconsin. And bless her soul, when she went to grad school down here, there was a significant confusion because she went from they actually wanted to put her in voice therapy for hypernasality, but that was how she learned to talk where she was from in Wisconsin. And so, we speak standard English, but that's a dialectal, that hypernasality of speech is different. And she was like, I speak totally fine. Y'all sound different, but she didn't say y'all. It was the way that she attempted to say y'all. I was like, honey, we don't say y'all like that down here. You got to put a diphthong in there, y'all. Okay. All right. And you said something else like 20 minutes ago, but I'm still racking my brain around it. You said certified bilingual clinician.
Well, so
what is that?
Yeah, ASHA does not certify a bilingual clinician, so they don't do that. But many states will have certain certifications, and I can think of New York right now. The farther east you go, the more certifications you need to practice different. If you come down to the west, we'll just take anyone. But
move to Arizona.
That's right. Come over to Arizona. But so there are ethical considerations with who can call themselves a bilingual speech language pathologist and or audiologist, and who cannot. And ASHA actually has principles of what they want, what they consider. They have principles of what they recommend a bilingual therapist should have, like the knowledge they should have. It's on their website, and so they have a code of ethics about cultural competence. I'm trying to quickly look it up because I didn't expect that question right away, but I have it in front of me. No. It's on the ASHA. I know it's on the ASHA website, and pretty much it means that you should be able, if you're bilingual, you should be able to describe the processes of normal speech language acquisition for monolingual and bilingual individuals. For those languages that you speak, you should be able to administer and interpret assessments in those two languages. You should be able to provide intervention in both of those languages. You should be able to be aware of the cultural factors. And here's an interesting thing. I'm Cuban. I grew up in Southern California after I arrived in the, Central American, South American community. I didn't, but I'm Cuban. And so I speak the Cuban dialect, and I know different dialects, the Colombian dialect, the different dialects. But just because you speak Spanish doesn't mean that you are culturally competent to treat different, people from different dialects of Spanish. So I just remembered this really quickly. I remember the Miss America or the Miss Universe pageant many, many years ago. And this beautiful, I want to say somewhere from Nicaragua, I don't know, some beautiful contestant walked up and they asked her, what is your favorite food? And the interpreter say, ¿Cuál es tu comida favorita? What's your favorite food in Spanish? And she answered back in Spanish, oh, me encanta la ropa vieja. And so the interpreter responded, oh, she loves old clothes. And so
oh my God,
ropa vieja is a dish that is shredded beef. So he didn't know that about her culture. So he translated or interpreted, literally. And she probably lost the crown because of that. But so just because someone is bilingual doesn't necessarily mean that they're culturally competent in that person's culture. They might share, think about people who speak English in Australia versus, the British Islands and the United States, and how different we say things, and maybe our localisms or our just some of the ways we express, maybe their vocabulary or even our syntax sometimes changes. So you have to be competent in the languages that you're assessing and being aware. That's what ASHA recommends. So if you are unable to explain developmental norms in that primary language, then you probably need to, start studying and look at those things and see if you can meet the criteria that ASHA puts out there. Other places, like in New York, they actually make you take a test, and you cannot treat as a bilingual SLP unless you have that certificate. But ASHA doesn't have that certificate.
I'm just thinking, how would they be able to assess, because there's so many different type, like you just described, dialects, and New York is the melting pot of our nation. I mean, I have family that came through Ellis Island. Like we went and we found their signatures from Switzerland when they came over. And then I'm like the ultimate melting pot. I'm Swiss, I'm Irish, and I'm Cherokee. And I remember, if anybody's ever been to Boone, North Carolina, they'd have the Trail of Tears as told from the Cherokee perspective and the Caucasian American perspective. And my dad took us to both. He said, you need to understand that you are both. And both of these are your people. And it was so hard for me at 10 to rectify that some of my people wanted to inflict harm on the other people. And it just, but what a profound upbringing. I mean, that's, yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my little dome around that. Okay. So what do we do? What do we do when? Because I live in Columbia, South Carolina. Y'all, we speak basically only standard English. We have very few interpreters. Our early intervention system is completely overwhelmed. And we do have a major researching university right smack dab in the middle. So sometimes we have patients that are children of professors or PhD students from around the world. And I had one that wanted me to go out and do therapy with a child who clearly had signs and symptoms of autism, but the family spoke Tagalog. I don't even know if I'm saying that right.
Tagalog, yeah. It's
and that was very
Philippines, yeah.
Yes. And so dad was pursuing a degree here. Mom spoke some English, but during the day, the child was with grandma who did not speak any English. And I walked in and felt like a basket case. We couldn't find an interpreter. But the child had self-injurious behaviors. And we needed to do therapy. So I kind of did the best that I could with a phenomenal early interventionist. And the mom realized that we were all struggling. So she actually adjusted her work schedule, bless her, to be there with us with her child.
Yeah,
What do you do?
it's really hard, but it's reality, and we need to be a little bit, forgiving of ourselves. We have to do what's best. So, you get to a situation where the difficulty is identifying the child as having a child with a disorder and not with a difference. So that's, and it's a lot easier when the child has obviously medical issues, it's beyond cultural, it's what it is. If a child's eating and he's having difficulty eating, maybe the culture issue.
It's clear that you need me.
Right. So, but the assessment is really important, and just because we need to know, if they qualify or not. Once they qualify, and you're certain of that, then we have to figure out how do we provide those services. And what you just did is very common. The thing that we shouldn't do is ignore it, is ignore the culture or ignore the language, or, and just we're just going to teach him in English. Or what I've heard also I've heard clinicians say in school districts say, we can't deliver these services in their language, so we're going to wait until they learn English and then deliver it then. Well, no, that's not appropriate either. So we have this responsibility to provide services in the best that we can, the most ethical way that we can. So I have done exactly what you have done. I had a family who were from Saudi Arabia, and I didn't have any interpreters here. And what did we do? And so we did, kind of Hanan type of early intervention type of thing, and trying to figure out what was culturally appropriate. There was a lot of conversation with Dad, who was the only one that spoke English, and then and that he would be involved in all the intervention. And we taught him how to observe, wait, and listen, and how to expand the utterances, and how to wait, and how to imitate. So we were able to work as a pair, trying to figure out this is what I think needs to happen here. Here are the goals. Do they meet with the goals for your family? If I say or ask anything that goes against what culturally you do, let me know. So there's a lot of flexibility, and it's just being that culturally aware and having cultural reciprocity, which means that you are accepting what they're bringing in as part of their culture, and you're also exchanging and letting them know, what your culture is, what the expectations are. There's this exchange that happens, and it's done in a professional manner, and it's done in a very respectful way. And so we do the best we can. The best thing to do is to, again, find an appropriate bilingual provider. If that doesn't happen, then we look for other ways. Using an interpreter is a way that is used by many. And sometimes we don't want to use family, if at all possible, because there's that bias. But sometimes we have no choice. Sometimes we use the child. What people need to understand is how to use an interpreter. Not all just because someone speaks another language doesn't make them a good interpreter. And I've been in situations where the interpreters are horrible, and they're saying what they think they should say. They're not saying anything that you're saying. So there's some training that's required so that they're being your voice and not just coming up with their own ideas and their own, their own feelings about things. That's not how it works. Yeah.
We need to do one on that.
Yeah.
Because I have said things and then I don't speak it, but I can understand some Spanish. And then what was translated, I was like, that is not what I said at all. And that's not safe what you recommended.
Right. So, exactly. And then I've been in that same situation where what was said was not only not correct, but it was completely the opposite of the advice I wanted to give. Let me just blow your world a little bit. Google Translate has come a long way from the old days.
Are we sure?
I use the and it depends how you use it, but I use the oral translator.
Okay, hang on. I'm gonna Google the Google Translate. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a microphone, and the trick to it is to keep really short phrases when you're translating it, and it will translate it orally back to you in that other language. But keep it really short phrases. Try not to use any, any sayings or. It was really funny. We had one of our students that told the parent. They asked a question the other day, and they used the Google Translate, and they said in Spanish to the parent, they were working on a McDonald's menu or something, trying to teach the parent how to order. And she says, "Well, what kind of foods do your kids like to eat?" And the translator came back in Spanish with, "What kind of foods do your baby goats like to eat?" So, that was, and the parent just looked, the person just looked, and I had to kind of come in and it's like, you said baby goats, and that's not what you meant. But it's not perfect, but I want you to, did you find it? Do you have it?
I just typed in, what is their favorite food? And then How do I change?
But look at the microphone. You can just go to Google and you look at the microphone. And then, once you get into like a Spanish, or you could go to Google Translate and pick your language, whatever language you want to go, English to Tagalog or English to whatever.
I'm going English to Spanish.
Okay. So you hit the microphone and you just say, good morning, how are you? And then you have it translate.
What is their favorite food?
Oh, wait.
¿Qué hay de comida favorita?
Was that all right?
Yeah. That was pretty close.
Okay, so then let me try. I'll talk. All right, so instead of entering text, how do you?
You can just talk into it. There's a microphone there. You see on the right-hand side.
I had it, and then it disappeared. This is amazing.
Yeah, so that's for really simple directions, or if you want to say, I'm not going to be here next week, or, we need to cancel our session, or something really short. If you're going to do this is for emergencies. This is for, and the parents will love it, and you can teach them how to use it too. And then they can talk to you as well. It's limited, but it's so much better than it used to be. And that's a tool that's available to anybody with a smartphone. So.
Oh, this is wonderful. Okay. I can't figure out how to just.
You have to play with it. You're just in, we're recording. We're here.
I know this is awesome. What do you want? Oh, yeah. No, I'm going to put it away now.
You want to play with it?
Totally going. My poor husband, when I wake up at 2:00 in the morning, I always research stuff on my phone. I can hear me pulling up all the different languages on there. Okay. All right. I just looked at the clock. We have 5 minutes left.
Are you kidding? This has gone so fast.
I know, right? Well, my goodness, this is how you and I talk every time.
That's true.
Everybody's like, how did that hour happen? Okay. So I think we covered most of the second question, how we can, and some strategies, but we had one last question, and it was what tips do you have for working with families who speak a language other than English and are from a culture different from that of the service provider? So, and we've interspersed some of
a little bit.
Well.
Is that cultural reciprocity and respect that's really important, that you acknowledge them, that you don't come in as, with an agenda of you need to learn English, or for your child, that you come in and you accept them at where they are, emotionally, physically, socially, whatever, culturally, where they are. We're there to provide a service for their child who has a disorder, who has a delay, who has a disability. And so you meet the parent where they're at, you look at them in the eye. Our different cultures smile and laugh at the same things. We have so much more in common. So you come in as someone who's going to assess, and that is huge. When you're using an interpreter, you don't look at the interpreter, you look at the parent always. You acknowledge them and you talk to them in first person. Hello, my name is so-and-so. I'm here to help your child to speak. And then you wait for the interpreter to interpret, and you encourage the interpreter to also use first language. And, sometimes you go into different places and they might offer you food, or they might offer you, there's always sometimes an exchange, and you need to be open to those things. The important thing is to build trust so that you can work together. The language is a barrier, but it's not the biggest barrier. Sometimes the biggest barrier is the fact that we close the door, we're afraid, and we don't interact human to human, person to person, to work together on this with this child or with this adult. So that's my biggest tip.
I love you.
I love you too.
You're amazing. I'm just thinking you need a solid 3 hours just to go through this. So I really feel like we need to do a you need to do webinars, friend. You need to lecture in math. Okay.
No, those are very scary, very scary.
Really? But you're such a natural at this. Yeah. My goodness.
This has been a lot of fun. I just want to let people know that we're all in this together. Just because I'm bilingual does not mean that I don't go through the same things that everybody does, because I don't speak every language. I am right there with you trying to figure this out. There are many resources that are online through ASHA, through different universities. There are many free things. Go check out the Leaders Project by Columbia University, Dr. Kate Crawley, and she's amazing. And there are some free narrative assessments there. There are some free CEUs that you can get for preschool. There's some tools for working with children with cleft palate from different countries and different languages. And that's all free out there. And so we just need to do a little research. And ASHA has links to these places. So you go to that ASHA practice portal and you look under multicultural and you can just put in a language and it comes up with information and articles and links. So part of this is getting yourself educated and arming yourself with information and being bold and not being afraid. Always looking for your client, your patient, your student and their needs.
I love that. Be bold. Don't be afraid. Advocate, educate. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Now, if someone has a question specifically for you, how can they reach you?
Well, they can reach me at my work email. So my first name is Fe, F-E, and it's just like Santa Fe, New Mexico. So 2 letters, F-E, .Murray, M-U-R-R-A-Y, at NAU, which is for Northern Arizona University, at nau.edu. So that's fe.murray@nau.edu. And I'm happy to answer questions.
You know me, I am nerdy and I am comfortable with it. I prefer the term geek chic. So I can't stress the importance enough of, replenishing my geek chic soul. So insert Feeding Matters. Their pediatric feeding resource library will fulfill what you need in order to do your job more efficiently. So from published research to helpful videos and recipes, Feeding Matters Resource Library has all the bases covered. Simply visit bit.ly/FM Resource Library to access the virtual hub of valuable information on pediatric feeding disorders. That's a wrap, folks. Once again, thank you for listening to First Bite, Fed, Fun, and Functional. I'm your humble but yet sassy host, Michelle Dawson, the All Things Peds SLP. This podcast is part of a course offered for continuing education through speechtherapypd.com. Please check out the website if you'd like to learn more about CEU opportunities for this episode, as well as the ones that are archived. And as always, remember, feed your mind, feed your soul, be kind, and feed those babies.